Hello, friends. I am very happy to welcome you back to your seats and introduce this next panel. First up, we have Richard Barlow. Richard will be talking about photography and art in general, but he will also perhaps be introducing you to the work behind this chalk drawing that he has produced for Lance Corner Photo over the last week. So maybe we will learn about all those things. Happy to say,
don't run out of time.
you will not run out of time. Happy to say, welcome, Richard.
And can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So as Allison says, I'm an artist. I'm going to talk about sort of the last decade or so of my artistic practice, how I ended up making things like this, and how that is a sort of process of coming to use photography both as subject in my art and source in my art. And so I'll show a little bit of each of those. To set that up, though, I'm going to show sort of what I was doing before that happened. I was making these oil paintings. They were often landscape-based, these. And these were, I was very interested in how images produce meaning. I guess in general that's something I'm interested in. And I was producing these paintings themselves through process, just kind of dripping ink onto a panel, sanding it, digging into it, and finding some sort of landscape imagery which I would then paint. So these were all developed through process. I was interested in landscape especially as a site of the production of meaning because, to my way of thinking, it's always a meaning that is being projected by us onto the land when this is happening. And at the time I was making these, I had a studio visit. There was sort of a small moment that kind of triggered a cascade of other choices, where there was a woman in my studio seeing this painting and others like it, who said to me, wow, these are really powerful. These places must be really important to you. And I said, they're not places, they're paintings, which was very much more what I was interested in. And then she said, as many well-meaning people will, oh, well, what you should do is think of places that are important to you and paint them. The suggestion being that that would make them more powerful, which, you know, was sort of problematic given that she had already assumed they were. That the rhetoric of painting is the thing that transmits that feeling, not my childhood memory or something. So this hopefully explains some of what I was thinking, and hopefully will become funny later. So I, in response to this, thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some places I haven't been. And I decided to, essentially from memory, paint other paintings that I'd seen. And so this is an Edvard Munch painting. In my memory, it was a nocturnal scene. This is the actual painting. And when I say from memory, I did sort of sketch the composition on Postage so that I got it essentially right, and then painted my memory. So I did this, and then this is my Caspar David Friedrich copy. The title is Eine Freundliche Geist, which is me making fun of his name being Caspar, so it's a friendly ghost is the name of it. This is the Friedrich painting that I worked from. And of course I was realizing that I'm not actually painting from paintings, these are photographs of paintings that I was looking at. And I thought, well, maybe I should work from a photograph, which is something I hadn't done for 20 years as an artist. And I decided to sort of start with an early one. So this is by Fox Talbot. It is a photograph of a landscape in England. It's in the style of a sort of romantic painting. And then I was sort of interested in this deferral of original in general. And within this, again, it's in the style of a painting. We've got on the site the trees. Within the image, there's an image of the trees. And Talbot invented the silver negative process, so he made an image from which he made this image, right? So there's an image of an image being made into an image, then I'm making an image of it. So I made this oil painting of this piece. And I kept doing work with this photo for quite a while. Again, from memory, I started making these watercolored postcards. I was thinking about how we use landscape imagery to produce meaning, and one is mailing them to each other. So these are 30 watercolor postcards. I would make one every day. and put it in the mail to the same person. And then when they all arrive, put them up in chronological order. And I've done this dozens of times. So these are a bunch of these different groups of these. Initially, they were being sent to a gallery and saying, will you put these up once they all arrive? Things like this. Then I started sending them anonymously to people I just thought were interesting. And so they would come every day for 30 days. And I signed them, but my signature is frankly illegible. They would have the title, which is Daily Bromide, and the date that I made it, and a signature. And then I was also, you can make custom postage stamps. So I was taking the previous set of 30 and making a postage stamp of that to put onto each of them. So you could, maybe by looking at that, sort of gather that there's going to be 30 and they go on a grid sort of like this. And it created an arbitrary composition. I liked that as well. And then I did a lot of work sort of punning on the photographic process. So this is a drawing, as far as I'm concerned, of the same photograph. It's made with silver leaf on paper, so it's white paper, which is this, and then this is silver leaf, and depending on the angle of incidence of the light, the silver either looks black or it looks much whiter than the paper. So in this case, the silver is lit up. And here it is from two different angles. So you can see that this drawing has within it both a positive and a negative, depending on how you move through the space. I then made a mural project that works the same way. You can see we've got the negative and the positive. But in this case, as the sun traverses the sky, in the evening, the sun is facing at this wall, and the silver lights up brighter than the white, and we get a flip again. But then I was realizing that I don't have the Talbot silver photograph. I kept looking at JPEGs of it. And I kept doing these things about silver, but it's really actual pixels that I was looking at. At which point I made this piece, which is about 17 feet wide, and made out of sequins, like on billboards that flap in the breeze. So this piece kind of dematerialized the image and made it into pixels and made it digital. These are gold and black sequins on a reddish painted wall. And when the air conditioning comes on in the gallery, they all start moving around, or if you walk past it, it all dematerializes. And here's another view of it installed in the museum. So at that point, I'd sort of put to bed this image, but I ended up getting a research grant to go to England, to go to Laycock Abbey, where Fox Talbot invented the silver negative photography. And I had proposed, sort of absurdly, that I would go and try and find these trees, because I'd painted them thousands of times at this point. And this photo from 175 years before, I was going to see if I could find them. I kind of liked the absurdity, but I went to Laycock Abbey, and in the one pub in town, I saw the curator of the Fox Talbot Museum, and I said to him, oh, I'm here looking for these trees, and I had two fears. One is that he would say, well, one is that I would just never find anything, and the other is that he would say, oh, there's a trail marked here, you can go stand there. So there wasn't that. He said, I have no idea where that is. I would look by the River Avon or by the pond in the back. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and eventually found one of the trees is still standing. If you've drawn something thousands of times, the branching pattern was really familiar in this tree on the right, and it probably is 175 or more years old because the trunk was over 6 feet wide, which you can't tell here. Pond obviously has algae on it. There were several stumps with missing trees in there, and this made me, from the left of the image I was doing, just to remind you of kind of, there's that branching pattern over right there. So I found this, and I'm not interested in rephotography type processes, so I didn't make art out of this. And while I was there, I also toured Laycock Abbey, where, of course, is the subject of the first silver negative photograph, which is this window. And I took a cell phone photograph of it from approximately where Talbot took it. And here is the negative and the original photograph that he made. And the negative is about the size of my thumb. It's a tiny photograph. So then I got interested in, well, let's play around with this image a bit. So this is another silver leaf on white paper piece, and you can see it's lit up here. This version is sterling silver leaf on paper, so it is slowly turning black as it tarnishes. So it's slowly turning from a positive to a negative, or negative to positive, in like the dumbest, slowest photograph ever. This is it a few months in as it's starting to change. Here is the silver leaf as you walk by it, so you can sort of see how this positive-negative effect happens. This is ebony pencil on a matte black acrylic. So even though it's black, the light makes it light up and it looks like it's light instead of black. So I was sort of interested in playing around these things. This was my sort of playing with the latent image. I drew this with lemon juice. When I was a kid, I learned you can write secret messages with lemon juice, and then I put a clip light on it and it exposed it, right? So it was like a white sheet of paper that an image came out of. I did the same thing with milk. That's another secret code thing. And this one I haven't done yet, but this is it flipped in Photoshop from negative to positive. I'd like to print this out now. And then I moved on to do a pixelated version of this, except this one is from my cell phone photograph. So this is a digital image I took, turned into a digital image. And here, if this movie will start, we should see it. So this is what it does in the breeze. It dematerializes, moves around. The windier it gets, the more busy it becomes. At the same time, I was thinking about other ways that landscape is used to produce meaning. And one weird site is advertisements for SUVs, for Jeeps and Hummers. And they don't even put the vehicle in. It's just a picture of a beautiful forest with their logo on it. To suggest that if you buy one of these vehicles, you'll have access to this landscape you desire. I think sort of implicit in there too, though, is weirdly you'll destroy it by going there in your Jeep. Or by driving around the city in your Jeep, you'll destroy it. So here's a Jeep ad, the same one. This one I think is especially weird. Like, there's no drowning polar bear out there, but there might as well be. So I decided to make some various projects based on these, but eventually I decided to do a chalkboard drawing. I was thinking of chalkboards as pedagogical. I did this on the studio on my wall. I thought these drawings were going to be really stupid, and just sort of as though you're quickly notating, here's a landscape. And this one sort of is. This was a concrete wall. It was very hard to draw on. But then I was given a show where I made one of these 10 feet wide and realized that the texture of the wall allowed me to create something like film grain, and that I could make something kind of subtle. So this is this first show. These are all SUV advertisements. And of course you see them, and they're kind of beautiful and moving. They're also temporary, fleeting, fragile. There were handprints where children touched it. People rub up against these things. At every opening of these, we'll see if it happens tonight, but someone will talk to me and say, is it really chalk? I say, yes, it's really chalk. And then they'll go like this and then jump back. And be horrified, you're not supposed to touch the art. There's always some fingerprints eventually. So this was a much larger version. This is about half a dozen SUV ads stitched together. It's about 50 feet long. And again, this is it's sort of fleeting and temporary. Your presence could damage it. So that hopefully maps onto an environmental concern, and maybe an existential one as well. And this was I did a few more of these from these advertisements, but then have started doing some from other sources. So when I was at Laycock Abbey, I grew up in England, not terribly far from there, maybe 100 miles away. And where I grew up, there was a copse of trees we played in all the time. I wondered if these trees that were important to me in my childhood look anything like these trees I keep painting. So I decided to go there. And they had recently chopped down a bunch of the trees. So there's these stumps everywhere, and there was some laying down. You can see there's still some kids playing in there. And I thought, well, that's perfect, because now I can't make any art of this, because it doesn't exist anymore, just like the fox tall. But then I did get this opportunity and decided to do a chalk drawing based on. I took dozens of photos of the remaining trees, and what I did was stitch them all together as though to sort of recreate the memory of the place. And we played in the center of it, and I had this opportunity to make a drawing on all 4 walls in a museum. So I recreated, just like memory is constructed, right? I constructed my memory of the place. Here's a detail of it. Here's another corner. I left in the stumps so that there was still some evidence of the change, but I also tried to make the memory whole again with this. I've since also done, this is birch trees near where I live now, in upstate New York, and I sort of stitched this together to create this slightly uncanny mirrored space. And I'm including this partially because yesterday we heard about Mies van der Rohe, and this is inside a Mies van der Rohe house in Chicago, the McCormick House. Here's a view of it from outside the house at the gallery opening. And this was another of these sort of birch tree, uncanny, sort of wrongly mirrored images. They seem mirrored, but they're not. Another recent, just this past year, project, I was asked to make a piece at the Bellevue Art Museum near Seattle, Washington. It was my first show on the West Coast of the United States. So I started thinking about it and looking up the history, landscape history of the area, and I found this photograph, which I thought was remarkable, of the after effects of logging near Seattle. And so I looked up a lot of historic photographs from the area of pristine forests and the after effects of logging. And I was making this 65-foot wide drawing, and I wanted it to have sort of the structure of this Thomas Cole painting. And in this Cole painting, over here in the east, we have tamed nature. It's beautiful and daylit. And then as we go to the west, we get like horrifying, nature and danger and storms and broken trees and things. With the idea that this sort of taming will be moving west. And I wanted to play with that and invert it and talk about the west. So what I did was stitched all of these images together to create this drawing and you would walk in on the right of this and see the sort of virgin forest. And as you move through the space, start seeing fallen trees, stumps, and the Cole is called the Oxbow because there's the bend in the river there. So I wanted to bend in the river, and you can see there's a wedge shape to the room, so I forced perspective to here. And then over here you have that after effects of logging image that I showed. And you can see the wedge shape of the room moved you through in an interesting way. Here's the whole image sort of flattened out. And a detail of what this is like up close. So then lastly, this image back here is from this trip I did to the Arctic. I was on a sailing ship with 26 other artists going around the archipelago of Svalbard. This is the ship we were on, and it was an incredible, sublime experience. Here's an iceberg. This glacier, which we eventually figured out the front face of that is 400 feet tall. And it took about 20 minutes to, in a little dinghy with a motorboat, to go the whole length of it. It was huge. And eventually we sailed till we hit the pack ice and could go no further. And it was apparently also the furthest north that this ship had ever managed to go, which of course immediately we think, we're the best, we made it the furthest north. But also that's because it's melted further back, right? These are polar bear tracks on the ice. So this was the highlight of the trip for me. And the other highlight was going to the Soviet ghost town of Pyramiden, which is completely intact. They just walked away from it. And I could go on and on about that. But while there, I took all these photos of the peeling paint inside, because the buildings all had either sort of sea green or blue paint that was peeling to reveal the white primer. It looked to me like nothing if not floating ice or islands. So I took hundreds of photos of this, and then when I got back, I didn't really know how to respond to this sublime, incredible experience. I didn't want to make a pretty picture of a glacier. So the first thing I did was this project of turning these into map drawings, as though I was mapping these places that don't exist, that are the peeling paint. So you can see this is this. So I made 100 of these. Here they are. I've displayed them in exhibition like this, and partially the idea is it starts as a big landmass that kind of falls apart more and more as though the water is rising or the ice is melting or something. And have now made this into an artist book where as you flip through, you get sort of that narrative. with this happening. But then I got opportunities to do more of these chalk drawings, and despite having thought I better not make a pretty picture of a glacier, I sort of have now. So this was, you can see those polar bear tracks in that big piece of ice. I sort of stitched this together from a lot of those images. And in these, there's often a dozen or so photos stitched together. They're sort of not real. And in this case, I wanted it sort of left to right to go from solid to open water. Here's one that was sort of in a space that wraps around a bit. And then this I just made a month or so ago. This is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is on display right now. And this one is about 75 feet long. And this was the first, the other ones, as you saw, were sort of flat pieces of ice. And this was the first one where I made a large sort of sculptural piece of ice as part of it over on this side, which is the same bit of ice that's back there. And that's my last slide. So.
Yeah, why don't you, we can have sort of initial thoughts, comments, questions as I take Rich's headset away and start preparing the next talk. Folks?
Oh, sure. A quick question about the origin of your work. I remember seeing this in the National Gallery in London about 6 years ago, Richard Hamilton's late work. I'm sure you're familiar with Richard Hamilton.
Yes.
Yeah, in his late work, he started to mix photography and put them together into paintings. And there's also a memory component there. I'm curious about there's any, you know.
I don't know that work.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
I'll look it up though.
Okay.
I know his early.
Not his early work, but
Yeah.
last few years of his life.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'd love to look at that. Yes.
What do you think about like being a big explorer? Because I was thinking about the cheap commercial and then
Yes.
going to the Arctic
Yeah.
and like being the explorer. That's like the same topic.
Right. How do I feel about
Yeah.
enacting that?
Yeah.
Weird. I mean, it was a sailing ship, which I guess is sort of an ecological approach to that. We learned to pull the sails up and down, and you know, I mean, they used the motor more than I would have liked, but I think that was part of the reason for that. And we visited a lot of sites of failed Arctic expeditions. There were a lot launched from Svalbard, weirdly. Several of them involving hot air balloons. I had no idea. And several with zeppelins. I just thought that would be the best way to do it when they froze and crashed. But yes, it's reenacting. I mean, it is sort of problematic and absurd. And I had to fly in a plane to get there. And so, you know, I'm not advocating some kind of purity about this.
So we will have to keep the rest of our thoughts until the lunch break. Help me thank Richard.